thank you very much for the introduction, which I didn't understand one word of. I apologize, I have to speak in English. My Bulgarian is a bit poor. Well, thanks for inviting me to be here and for making all this happen. Three wonderful ladies I collaborated with, that was a real pleasure. And maybe somebody can even switch that, or have I to speak? I have to get closer. Okay, okay. Okay, you understand me? Yeah, I hope so. Good. So I would like to present you a number of works I've been doing during the past many years. Most of my works are based on everyday photography. That means I do not take photographs myself, or not often, but work with photographs that other people have made. And these photographs are not just the raw material for the work, but they are also the topic. So many of the works are about photography. And when I started working with this type of imagery, we have to keep in mind that the situation in Europe was totally different from how it is today. Let's say in the early 80s, the main attempt of the photographic community was to prove the point that photography can be art. And I found that rather uninteresting, because of course it can be art, but the interesting thing is it can be much more than art, and that is something that I always was interested in working with photographs. It's basically you could meet the same picture in the morning in a newspaper, in the evening at the gallery, and depending on the context where the respective photograph is being displayed, it takes on a completely different meaning and function. And that's one of the things I've been working with for many years. So the first work I want to show you is called Bilder von der Straße, Pictures from the Street, and that's something I've been doing for 30 years, and it is exactly what the title suggests. I have been collecting photographs found in the street. When I started this project, it was actually not meant to be an artwork. I was editing and publishing a little magazine at that time, and I was writing an essay about photo museums, and I was interested in the questions, what do photo museums collect? And of course, there's something like an established canon of what is being collected, and it's good photography. And so we arrive soon at the question, what do they not collect? That's bad photographs. And I think that's a big mistake, because both the good and the bad together make photography. So if you want to get an idea of what photography is, basically you have to include samples of everything. And walking through the city, one day I found a snapshot lying on the ground, and I picked it up, I looked at it, I dropped it again, and I kept on walking, and then I said, hey, this is exactly what you were looking for. This is the perfect bad photograph. So I ran back to the place where that photograph was, and, well, it was gone with the wind. But from that day on, I started picking up all photographs I found. You know, the museum, coming back to that question, collects fine examples of our culture for the future. And these photographs that I find, they're supposedly not, they're not allowed to have any future at all. So they must be so bad or so disturbing that somebody decides to destroy them and throw them out. And because I was interested in finding out what's out there, I did not make any selection or editing. I included all photographs I found in this project. And I was not interested in highlighting something I like or dislike or whatever, but I was trying to create a survey of photographic garbage. In the beginning, this was a rather casual activity, but slowly it turned into a life-changing obsession. It changed my perception of urban space. You know, I walked through cities like a truffle pig, always scanning the ground and picking up things I was interested in. And the more my attention shifted towards photographic garbage, the more of them I found. It's like, you know, selective perception. The majority of photographs found are clearly thrown out intentionally. They are not lost. So somebody spent a lot of energy in the destruction of them. And I find them interesting both as visual artifacts, but also as documents of human life. I know nothing about these photos, except when and where I found them. And everything else is up for imagination. And your guess is as good as mine. The pictures were thrown out because something went wrong, either with the photo itself or with the life of the people depicted. We don't know what went wrong with this couple, but it is very likely that something did go wrong. So, you know, the photograph was probably first made to confirm a happy relationship, and then when the relationship wasn't that happy anymore, the photograph had to suffer. We don't know what went wrong inside this photo booth, but the result is an outstanding picture. Artists used to make kind of this type of thing. Some photos achieved a particular quality after they were exposed to sunlight and rain. People stepped onto pictures or cars drove over them, and these interactions add to the quality of the respective picture. Many of them are ripped up in kind of voodoo-like acts. There's a lot of human energy spent, which indicates how important it must have been for somebody to get rid of that picture. All the ripped up pictures I reassembled as well as possible with all the details I found. And funnily, although this project is a study of anonymous, discarded photographs, I consider it a very personal work. Looking at these pictures works for me like looking at my personal album, because they remind me of 30 years of traveling. It has exactly the same function as I would have as photographs I would have taken myself. That's something very funny about photographs. You know, we tend to believe that they are personal, but actually you might just as well pick up pebbles on the beach and they have exactly the same function as a photograph you took yourself. After many years of collecting, I thought about completing the project, but I didn't quite know how to do this. But eventually, the success story of digital cameras brought it to an end. Pushing the delete button replaced the act of ripping up pictures. There's nothing out there anymore. So after 30 years, the project came to a natural end, and I was quite happy about that. So I'm no longer a travel pig. I can't actually look at cities anymore and at people. So this is the very last photograph I found. The number of photographs had decreased rapidly during the past years of the work. After 30 years and 1,000 photographs found, I stopped the work. And this is how it's being presented in exhibitions. So all the pictures are mounted on board, and then they are presented with captions that mention the place and date where they were found, because that's everything I know about them. Of course, it's nearly impossible to exhibit a complete project of 1,000 pieces, and for that reason I invented a very systematic form of selection that is always based on a very simple mathematical calculation about how many running meters are there available in the gallery, how many pictures can I exhibit, and then it's a selection of every fifth or every sixth or every seventh out of the ongoing series, and as a result of that, the exhibition looks very different every time it's being installed. Now, this project also, I was interested in getting this printed as a book, but I had very specific ideas about what this book should be. It should contain all the pictures, and they should all be presented in original size in the chronological order of the finding without any comment. And I contacted a number of publishers for a while because I was convinced this is a work that is worth publishing and was exhibited often, but of course no publisher was willing to go for it. And after a while I started seriously thinking, Joachim, if you were a publisher, would you publish that? And the answer is no. It's pretty obvious why. But then I said, well, I'm not a publisher, so I can't do it anyway. And, you know, in the age of digital print, it actually became rather simple to publish yourself. And so I made this 4-volume work that I'm actually quite happy with, very simple design. It contains all the photographs in the chronological order of the finding, all of them presented in original size. No graphic funnies, just what it is. And I'm absolutely not interested in the fact that you just print and sell few copies if you make something like that as a self-published thing. You know, it's people always tend to think that something that is printed in a large edition is better than something that's printed in a small edition. I'm not subscribed to that idea. Numbers have nothing to do with quality. Numbers are quantity. Maybe sometimes they come with money, but it doesn't add to the quality. So, for another long-time project, also that is long time over, I was interested in identifying repetitive patterns in everyday photography. And when you look at a large number of photographs, it becomes similarities in pictures become quite obvious. If you just look at one picture, it's one picture. But if you look at 100 pictures, you start to discover similarities. And if you look at 1,000 pictures, you see nothing but similarities. If you look at 1,000,000 pictures, it's the absolutely striking quality of it. We don't learn at school how to make pictures, and our parents don't tell us how to make pictures, but somehow we all arrive at making very similar pictures. It's a funny process of perception and imitation, and I was interested in figuring out how that works. And when I found these 4 postcards in one postcard rack, things became so clear that I started to explore that in a very broad way. So I gathered large amounts of snapshots, postcards, newspaper photographs, commercial photographs, what you have, and I grouped them according to particular outstanding visual features. So, similarities, of course, mirror uniform social rights. For a wedding, the bride is dressed in white, the man wears dark, the woman stands to the man's right, flowers are obligatory, etc. Nothing changed in decades. Children are a common motif in snapshots, and their training in role models is depicted in many photographs. Studio photos are made that commemorate rites of passage and play a role. Religious holidays are photo opportunities resulting in similar pictures. Travels are among the most common reasons for taking snapshots. Possessions and acquisitions are presented as signs of success and wealth. An entire industry churns out unassuming collectibles. Surveillance cameras capture decisive moments. Lifestyle magazines celebrate consumerism. Trade catalogs stimulate consumption with standardized photos of standardized dreams. There's an endless supply of similar photographs. I collected thousands of them and assembled several hundreds of these panels. So you never see just one single photograph, but it's always groups of them, and in exhibitions it's always groups of groups. So altogether this is an encyclopedia of uncreative photography. And I was quite happy with the project, but there were two problems. We're still in the pre-digital age. One problem is to assemble these panels, you need huge numbers of photographs, but there's always limited supply. You know, even when I, let's say, went to a flea market and bought everything available, you just return home with a few hundred pictures, but that's not a lot. You need thousands. But the other problem I also faced, and that made me eventually stop it, is working with material from flea markets. I'm always half a century behind my own time, because things arrive there after somebody's death usually. And I did not want to spend the rest of my life solving my grandfather's problems. So I was more interested in focusing on contemporary imagery. For that reason, I put this project to an end, but 10 years later, I came back to the very same questions, and that was when we had entered the digital realm. In 2008, I started working with this site. It was at that time the biggest online photo sharing site, and the numbers of photos uploaded had already reached a critical number that is enough to work with. So basically every day more photographs are uploaded to these sites than I could ever look in my entire life. And the problem with there is, theoretically, we have access to an unlimited number of photographs. There's billions of photographs online that can be studied and looked at and downloaded, but that's only in theory. Practically, they are not accessible because the vast majority of pictures are uploaded without any captions or descriptions or tags. That means they will never be picked up by a search engine. So let's assume you're looking for a photograph of a black and white cow standing in a Dutch polder in front of modern windmills. The one you see at the left would be a perfect find, but it's only found if you search for P1010815. And nobody does that, obviously. So, fortunately, little excuse. If there are captions, they are often totally useless. Is that readable? Yes, I guess it is, yeah. So, Florence is something like a mix of Italian, English, and fantasy, and Pizza Tower is interesting. But nobody will ever search for Pizza Tower, and people searching for the Leaning Tower of Pisa will not find this nice snapshot of the Pizza Tower. This is actually, this is not unique. This happens very, very often, that you have just like completely useless textual information around pictures. And the search engine only picks up text, not pictures. So what I did at that time, the online photo sharing site had this one particular page that showed a random selection of photographs uploaded the previous minute. And I studied this page up to 15 hours a day and refreshed it every few seconds. And whenever I found something that I found interesting for one reason or the other, I downloaded it and then refreshed the page again and again and again. So you get an idea. You have probably you know all those pictures or the type of pictures you make in yourself. You have seen them, and there's unlimited supply. You just need patience to dig into it. The photographs were presented to me in a random way, and that was just perfect because I did not have a preconceived set of criteria I was searching for, but I was curious to learn what is out there. Is it just more of the same that we already know, or are there new patterns? And for that reason, well, also, again, the longer I did that, the more addicted I got to it. Eventually, I identified something between 300 and 400 recurring patterns, and selected a number of them, and I will present you a few that I found outstanding. So people take photographs of themselves in various ways, either holding the camera at arm's length or in the mirror, like we see here. The word selfie was not yet invented in 2008. If it's not just the person, it's often a person with the body doing the same thing. It's people's shadows. In old snapshot photography, the shadow was often accidentally part of the picture, but now it's intentionally. If camera is being put there, is pointed downward, often attracted by shoes or painted nails. Other people's feet seem also to be very interesting for many people. So are other body parts. The no photo hand is just as welcome an opportunity as the photo of the person behind the hand. Again, traveling is a major topic. People going by car photograph the road and what they see at the side of the road, landmarks along their road. And if there's nothing else, they turn themselves in the mirror again. There's things inside the car to be photographed. And when they arrive, it's the parking lot. People going by train start by photographing the plane. Plane, not train, plane, yeah, of course. They photograph the documents they need for traveling. Once the plane is airborne, passengers follow its itinerary on a screen. They photograph the food that's being served on the plane. And when they arrive, they photograph their hotel room and the view out of the room. In the evening, it's the sunset. And then it's the attractions they came for. Interactions with the attractions. The one picture at the museum. And the postcards they don't send anymore because sending pictures by phone is so much easier and cheaper. Eventually you have to affirm yourself where you are. So much for traveling. At home, people photograph their possessions and their collections, everything they value, the contents of their wardrobes. Interactions with other species are a thing that plays an important role, in particular if killing is involved. Trophies of hunting, but also the photograph itself is a trophy. Other animals we don't kill, and the animals we keep in our homes, and then the ones that run away because they don't like it at home anymore. Eventually, one of my favorite findings in this process was the first photograph people take. It's usually the box the camera came in. So I selected 96 of these and turned each of these categories into one print-on-demand book. They all have the same number of pages and show well-balanced double spreads of the respective pattern. And together these 96 books form a library of contemporary everyday photography in 96 chapters. In exhibitions, that is shown in a very sober, minimal kind of installation. And I discovered actually something very interesting. You know, if you make, as an artist, if you make exhibitions in a more or less traditional understanding and put pictures at the wall, usually there's an attention span of a few seconds in a gallery. You know, people enter, look around, and going saw it. If you exhibit books, people spend hours in the gallery, and they go from book to book and from page to page. I've seen people spending 2-3 hours in book exhibitions. I found that super interesting. When working on this project, I had, as an ideal place, I had a reading room of a monastery in my mind. So this is actually a former monastery in Italy where the work was shown, and I was super happy when that happened. So that was the last very big project I made. And in the beginning, I mentioned that I had found something like several hundred categories. So many of the ones that were not included in the final selection of those 96 books were discarded, but a few of them I came back to in very specific projects. And one is actually a very funny one. I found a number of snapshots of people standing in the middle of a road by an X painted on the pavement. And I was wondering about that. What's happening here? Some people may recognize the building in the background. That is the former school book depository at Delhi Plaza in Dallas, Texas. It's the place where Kennedy was shot. So people apparently have the desire to pose at the place where he was hit by the bullet. Supposedly, the X on a pavement marks exactly the spot where he was hit by the bullet, and then people go there and get their picture taken and stand there laughing and having a good time. Now, in figuring out what was happening there, I came across a webcam that is placed exactly at the position where the shooter was standing. So the perspective of the camera matches exactly the perspective of the gun. And watching this webcam from the position of the shooter, we can see how people take photographs that are later to be found on online sharing sites. So for about half a year, I studied this webcam for like half an hour or so every evening around noontime in Dallas when the light was right. And this is what happens there. Now, the strange thing is, you know, this is not a small road. This is a 3-lane on-ramp for a highway. This is a bit dangerous, actually. So on a very busy day, it looks like this. And you know, you seriously wonder why would people risk their lives for a snapshot in a rather weird position anyway. So after I had a good selection I mean, every time I found something interesting, I took a screenshot of the webcam. And after I had a good selection of material, I started working on a book, photographs of people taking photographs combined with other people's snapshots made in that situation. You may wonder why I mean, you know, it's kind of an obvious question. Why do people do that? And I really didn't have a proper answer. Why would somebody have the desire to take that type of picture? And eventually I found a caption to one of the photographs, and it reads, "I don't know why I felt the need to stand by the X, but judging from everyone else, it would appear to be the thing to do." And I think this is one of the most revealing captions that explains a large part of today's photography. People take photographs for no particular reason, but because it appears to be the thing to do. It's just as simple as that. So, another work I made, this is also a leftover from the big Other People's Photograph series, The Watch. Before I found photographs like these, I had no idea that there's people in the world who own more than one watch, or two maybe, but there are. Of course, it's nearly exclusively men, and they own expensive watches. They collect them, and they like to show them. So here's a small selection of one man's watch collection. Each of them costs about 10 or 20,000 euros. It's a bit more tidy one. You know, people even start photographing their watches before they own them. You know, it's the desired object already is being photographed. And then once they have them, they photograph them time and again, and they love to show them off. There's a huge community out there of watch lovers and watch fetishists who share their imagery. As opposed to professional photographers, most amateurs do not pay attention to the time shown on the face of the respective watch. Professionals always set the watch to 10 past 10. You can study any commercial trade catalog of, let's say, any watch factory. They always show exactly the same time. It's always 10 past 10. Because somebody decided that this is what looks good on the face of a watch. Now, I spent the time of the COVID lockdown to work on this project because I thought during the lockdown our relationship with time has changed dramatically. You know, most people are used to selling their time, and all of a sudden that doesn't work anymore. So people had to reconsider what do they do with their time while photographing their watches, obviously. So I spent several months searching for photographs of wristwatches, and then getting rid of the color and organizing them in the sequence of the time shown on the face of the watch. My idea was to get 700 consecutive pictures for each minute in 12 hours. So this is now 2 past noon, and now it's 1 minute later, and another minute later, and so on. I did not quite achieve 720 because after I had 550 or something, like I was physically no longer able to read the watch. It's a very strange process. But then I turned this into a book with 720 pages. So it's ideally, if you look at this book, you spend 12 hours with it and turn the page once a minute. And occasionally there's a blank page because that was the missing minutes in the collection of 720. And yeah, it's just like it goes on and on and on. And this also exists as an installation in the space. It's 12 lines with 60 frames each, and you can spend 12 hours looking at it. So that's what I brought for you, and I think now is some time to ask questions if you have any. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you so much for you coming here and for your wonderful presentation. I have a question about the last project, about the watch. I'm a big fan of Christian Markley, and did you know about the work before? And
of course, that's a clear reference to that.
It's an amazing reference, and I love how you kind of installed the blanks. And can you tell us a bit more about the process, about the reference, about the piece, or?
No, I have seen Chris Markley's The Clock. I don't know whether you're all familiar with that. Basically, it's a 24-hour movie compiled of hundreds of scenes taken from film history, each one including some reference to time, or either a wristwatch or a clock at the wall or whatever. So basically you have high noon, so the man going into a Woody Allen movie, and but it's so fantastically edited. Also, the sound editing is so fantastic. It's a masterpiece. I think it's one of the best artworks of our time. And it was shown several times. It only exists in a limited edition of 5 copies. That is only shown in very specific settings that are crucial for the watching of it. I remember, I think the first time I saw it was at the Centre Pompidou in Paris. And I was sitting in that for like 1 hour, and then I looked at another exhibition, and then I went back there and watched it for another hour. And the bonus of that work is you always know exactly how late it is because it's synchronized with real time. So you can just sit in the cinema and you always know how late it is, and you get a kind of an introduction through film history. So I found it a super impressive work, and of course I didn't mention that in my work, but it's absolutely obvious that there's a clear reference to that work. But I did not make exactly the same, so I limited myself to 12 hours because I did not wish to include the digital watches, and it's just like once the full circle. And also like actually at the end I was quite happy about the blanks in there because it leaves space for imagination. You can will it be another Rolex, or maybe is it just a Swatch, or yeah, something like that. Does that answer your question?
Hi, thank you. Looking at your work, it really reminded me of how AI learns how to scrape the internet of similar pictures and then to generate new ones. Have you thought about your practice within the context of AI and new technologies?
That is basically impossible to answer. If we talk about AI today, let's hope it's not being recorded, because whatever we say, it will be ridiculous tomorrow. That's guaranteed. But I'm also not the specialist to talk about it because I didn't really look into things in detail. From what I see so far, I see that there's a big potential and a big danger, but I, for myself, decided I do not want to spend my remaining years looking into that. I leave that to the smart young guys who will figure something out.
Okay, thank you for the presentation, really amazing. My question is related to the different kind of collections you make. Have you ever worked with the same collection but ended up in different projects? And also, do you have, like in the beginning of a project, do you have like too many ideas how to forward it? And what is the process to narrow down to one very clear thing?
Yeah, well, that's a bit difficult to answer in general, but I'll try. Yes, there's always many ideas, and then you start working, and then you realize they don't work, and then you get a new idea. There's a beautiful poem by Bertolt Brecht. Erst machst du einen Plan und bist ein großes Licht, dann machst du einen zweiten Plan, gehen tun sie beide nicht. Let me translate that in a clumsy way. First you make a plan, and you're a big genius. And then you make a second plan, and then you realize both of them don't work. It's always a back and forth process, and sometimes you start with a pretty clear idea of what you want to achieve, and then in the process of working, you encounter problems and difficulties, and then you navigate your way around it, and sometimes you drop something, and sometimes you turn it around completely different. It's never exactly what you think it would be, and I think that's okay. It's true that there's many more ideas that don't make it at the end, because I mean, you know, sometimes I wake up in the morning and I find in my own handwriting a stroke of genius next to my bed, and when I start working on it, I say, oh, what a stupid idea. It's just how it works.
Thank you for a marvelous presentation. I was curious to learn a little bit. There is important ethical aspect in working with other people's images. So it's interesting to hear how do you relate with it, whether you were moved by all those personal dramas contained in images, and then whether you had occasions that people recognize themselves during the exhibitions in which you present their images. And then with the copyright, of course, next issue is...
Yeah. Well, let's start from the beginning. Whether I was moved by something personally, I try not to be. I work about the images, not about the people. It's not about the individual and about the individual's biography or story or imagined story or whatever, but it's about the images. So I try to look at that in a non-personal way. Of course, there are ethical considerations. I am aware of working with other people's photographs and that it could touch on individual sensibilities. I try not to do anything that, in my opinion, could hurt anybody or could damage anybody, but I can never be sure. Everybody asks, I mean, that's like the most frequently asked questions is, did anybody ever discover themselves in an exhibition? Actually, yes, only once. Or let's say a person recognized a friend in a found snapshot, and I made a scan of the photograph and sent it to that person and asked about whether she would mind it being in the exhibition, and she replied right away that she actually doesn't remember that photograph, doesn't have any clue how I could have gotten it. I didn't remember either. But she also didn't mind. She just asked that her name will not be mentioned with it, which I didn't know anyway before somebody contacted me. And finally, the copyright question is something I'm not thinking about. I'm not a jurist, and I don't want to discuss legal issues. If anybody has legal issues with my work, talk to somebody who is knowledgeable in that field. There are, of course, in particular in the digital realm, there's a lot of attention to things, and it can easily happen that you become the subject of the 5-minute excitement that is like one of the signature moves of our time. It did happen. In the beginning, I thought when I work with these Flickr images, I should give the community an opportunity to see what I'm doing. So I created the Flickr account myself and uploaded photographs of the books with brief descriptions. And at one particular moment, a group of active users spotted that and started a real campaign, like with a lot of hate mail. You know, when I opened my mailbox in the morning, it was like flooded with insults and whatever. And they tried to chase up people whose photographs I had actually used. And 2 of these people did eventually contact me. Both of them said, "Oh, I noticed that you took one of my pictures in your book. I'm so happy that you picked one of mine. I'm so proud to be a part of your project. Could you maybe send me a copy of the book?" Which I did, and then that was that. So, quite often people have ideas about what could go wrong, but actually I think if you create something good and beautiful, you don't really run into trouble. And at the same time, it's clear for everybody there's no big money involved. You know, if you make something that is commercially a big thing, that's a different situation. But unfortunately, that's not true for me. Any more questions?
You work a lot with the form of the book.
Yes.
How did this started? When do you get interested into making your project into books? And also, do you work with a designer?
Okay. Two good questions, actually. I'm happy to answer that. I started making books when I was a student. And funnily, I had never heard of artist books. Basically, I thought I had invented that, you know. But I was just working on something when I was a student, and the book seemed to be the obvious form to put something in context. It's a very useful shell, you know. If you have a proposal to make, you want to organize thoughts, you want to organize visuals. A book is a perfect form, and all the books together form the library, and the library is, I think, the biggest artwork mankind has created collectively, and I'm very happy to add my little chapter to that collective artwork. I continued making books when I was a student and after I was a student, and of course they were all made with very limited means, with no budget, with zero budget, with tiny budgets. And as much as I liked conceptually the form of the book, I was not super happy with the production value, because, you know, at that time we worked with Xerox copy. Around 1980, Xerox copy had improved so much that you actually got really black on paper, not just gray, and it was possible to work. And I made books in small editions, but also at that time distribution was a completely different thing. You couldn't have an online shop because there was no online. And throughout the world, there were maybe five bookstores where artist books were being shown and sold. So it was a tremendously limited way of getting things out there. And at the same time, lots of people in the art world had not really a good understanding of books, because they knew art books, but artist books were a different animal. And I remember working with one gallery, and I brought him a number of books. And so next time I came to Paris and said, "Oh, what's going?" Well, I gave them away. And said, "What do you mean you gave them away? You're throwing out my artwork?" And I said, "Yeah, it's just books." Okay, thank you. And you still find that attitude but at the same time, I mean, then during the past decades, artist books have acquired as a medium a different status, and when digital print became a viable option to work with, I was super happy, because I thought it's invented personally for myself, because that's exactly what I needed. So I was able to produce all these books that I had kind of piled up, and between 2008 and 2014, I produced a large number of books. Just basically, they were already there as drafts or dummies, and they just needed to be produced. And I was very happy to do that. I do not work with designers, because I studied design myself. I'm not a very good designer, but I'm happy to do it myself, because the problem of working with designers is they have ideas, and that's not good. They don't look, but they have ideas. And whenever I worked with a designer, I was close to kill. And so I'm super happy doing my own modest little thing with limited budget. I made 3 or 4 books with publishers. I'm not happy with one of them. I mean, I'm super happy that they get them out in the world. You know, they can do things that I can't do, in particular distribution. With my means, I don't get enough copies out in the world. So I'm happy to do something when I think, or when there's an opportunity to get it out into the world and get like international distribution, which is nearly impossible with as a one-person enterprise. But you always have to fight with an all-knowing editor and with a designer with ideas, and that is a tiresome fight, and I'm happy to avoid that.
Okay, and an additional question to this. Okay, for the books, but for the exhibitions, do you work each time with the curator, or like now with Nadejda Pavlova?
That depends very much on the habits of the respective institution, the scale of the project. There's not one answer. That's every situation is different, and you work with what is there. And here it worked easily, and thanks.
Because you showed on the presentation like big and time-consuming projects, but do you have some small projects for a short time, and how often do you, I don't know, how often do you release such small projects?
There's a pretty good overview on my website, which of course I don't want to go through now. But yes, there's little things. I mean, just like the 2 prints in the exhibition here, it's a small project made specifically for this exhibition, because I wanted to make this exhibition with my own, with the library I created myself, but I wanted to contextualize it in the bigger framework of the general library. And so I was searching for photographs people posted online showing their favorite books, and I was working on the assumption, if we combine many photographs by many people, each one showing everybody's favorite books, this would be the perfect library. So it's a very small, modest project done. Maybe I'll show it another time, so in a different context. Yeah, there's many of those. But I mean, for the presentation here, I focused on a few bigger things, because I think they are easier to explain, like the conceptual framework about it.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, there's another chair, yeah.
She's a designer, by the way.
Yeah. Well,
You shouldn't have said that.
I could have guessed that. Right. Yeah. That is, for the ones who cannot make the reference, there's those 3 small posters that are at the entrance of the gallery. When I was busy with, let's say, that big archive project, I also was writing a few things about photography, and I came more and more to the idea that photography probably is the only medium where quantity, the quantity of pictures that are being produced, is the most significant quality of. There's a tremendous overproduction in photographs. Both amateurs and professionals keep producing photographs day after day after day, and quite often they are only used once or looked at once and then replaced by the next one. And I thought this is kind of a madness, that the tremendous overproduction. At the same time, Germany was like the country where people became quite obsessed with ideas of recycling and protecting the environment and so on. But I also had a number of doubts about how serious that is and how well it works. And so I designed that satirical poster suggesting that photography, mass photography, is an ecological problem, and I suggested that photographs should be disposed of in an ecologically sound way. And stupidly, I included my own address and told people, send your unwanted photographs to the Institute for the Reprocessing of used photographs. I put this out in a few hundred copies and sent it to editors, curators, and so on. And this is something that completely ran out of control. I was totally surprised, you know. Many people took that seriously. It got reprinted in many newspapers and magazines. And I was flooded with tremendous numbers of, the postman was coming every day. I was living in the walk-up fourth floor, and he hated me from day one because he had to carry all the parcels up there. But I received, of course, a lot of material that I was able to work with. So also, like, the most well-known, probably, work I ever made is photogenetic drafts, a combination of split portraits. So like a commercial photo studio sent me their entire archive of negatives. But somehow they must have had a bit of a doubt, and so they had cut everything in two, and I received like these tremendous boxes full of half negatives. In the beginning I thought, oh, this is a pity, because I would have loved to have a look at the complete pictures. But then I just grabbed a handful from one box and a handful from the other box and started making combinations of non-existing persons. So it's like genetic engineering, you know, where information is being split and then recombined. And I did that photographically, and so I was able to create portraits of people that are both male and female and old and young, and it's a very rich, and visually it also was like super striking and very. But the most interesting aspect of it was like, you start something and it runs out of control. I was totally surprised by that, and because if you work as an artist or a designer, whatever, you always think more or less you know what you do and what that could have, what kind of implications that could have, and what kind of effect you create or could create or might or want to create. I learned better. Yep. So if you don't have any more questions, maybe we'll stop it for today. Thank you.